Dear children, we will move on to the second part of this chapter, that is demand. The name of the chapter is Consumer Equilibrium and Demand. We have finished with the first part of the chapter, that is Consumer Equilibrium, and now we are moving on to the second part of the chapter, that is demand. Now we will be learning about two types of demand: individual demand, market demand, and the determinants of individual and market demand in this video. Let us move on to the definition of demand. Now, what is a demand? We all demand commodity, but what is the definition of demand? Demand is the quantity of a commodity that a consumer is willing and able to buy at a particular price during a given period of time. During a given period of time, how many quantities of a commodity that a consumer is willing to buy and able to buy at a particular price is known as demand. So, what is demand? Demand refers to the quantity of a commodity that a consumer is able and willing to buy. Consumer is able and willing to buy at a particular price during a given period of time. So, during a given period of time at a particular price, how much quantity of a commodity that a consumer is willing to buy and able to buy, that is known as demand. There is another definition for demand. Demand is a desire backed by the ability and willingness to pay for a commodity. Once again I repeat, demand is a desire backed by the ability and willingness to pay for a commodity. So, how much quantity of a commodity that a consumer is willing and able to buy at a given price during a given period of time. Now, there are two types of demand. One is individual demand and one is market demand. Now, what is meant by individual demand and what is meant by market demand? Now, individual demand, this definition of individual demand is same as that of demand. What is the definition for demand? Demand is the quantity of a commodity that a consumer, one consumer, is willing and able to buy at a particular price during a given period of time. So, a consumer, that can be used for individual demand. So, the definition of demand can be used for individual demand. So, definition of both demand as well as individual demand stands to be the same. So, usage of a consumer, that is the main part of individual demand. So, the definition of individual demand and demand is the same. Now, what is market demand? Market demand, how will you define market demand? A small change in the definition here. Market demand is the quantity of a commodity that all consumers in the market is willing and able to buy at a given price during a particular period of time. So, instead of a consumer, you can write all consumers in the market. That is the only difference between individual demand and market demand. In individual demand, we use a consumer, and in market demand, we use all consumers are willing and able to buy. That is the difference between individual demand and market demand. So, you need to learn only one definition which can be applied to both individual demand and market demand. The only difference is that for individual demand, a consumer, and for market demand, all consumers. Okay? So, we have defined demand, and there are two types of demand: individual demand and market demand. So, what is a demand? The quantity of a commodity that a consumer is willing and able to buy at a particular time period during at a particular price. So, individual demand is a consumer, market demand is all consumers. That is the only difference that you need to make in the definition. Now, we will learn more about individual demand. First type of demand, individual demand. So, we are going to learn more about individual demand, demand by a consumer. Now, what are the factors which influences demand for a consumer? Determinants of individual demand means factors influencing individual demand. So, determinants of individual demand means factors influencing individual demand. What are the factors influencing the individual demand? Price of a given commodity. Price of a given commodity. If you are going to a shop to buy a commodity, if its price is high, your demand will be less. But if the price is less, your demand will be high. But there are certain exceptional cases. If you are so brand conscious, even if the price of that product is higher, you will go only for that particular product. But normally, if the price of a commodity is high, the demand will be less. And if the price of the commodity is less, demand will be more. So, price of a commodity is the first factor which influences the individual demand. So, if the price is high, demand will be less, and if the price is less, demand will be more. This is with regard to the price of a given commodity. Next is taste and preference. According to the taste and preference, the demand for a commodity can change. If you prefer more of one particular commodity, you may demand more. So, according to your taste and preference, demand will be more. If you have less taste and preference for a commodity, your demand will be less. If you have more taste and preference for a commodity, your demand will be more. As simple as that. Now comes the next one, prices of related goods. What are these related goods? The goods which are related to each other. What are these related goods? In economics, there are two types of related goods. One is substitute goods and the other one is complementary goods. So, two types of related goods that we learn in economics is substitutes and complementary goods. What are these substitute goods? What is meant by substitutes? A good which can be used for one, which can be substituted for another, is known as substitutes. If the concerned subject teacher is not present on particular day, a substitute teacher will come to your class, isn't it? Likewise, substitute. One good is substituted for the other one. That is known as substitutes. Complementary goods means the goods which are used together is known as complementary goods. Pen and ink, car and petrol, bread and jam, all these are complementary goods. So, substitute goods are those goods which are used as substitute for another. Complementary goods are those goods which are used together. Now, therefore, in economics, we speak about two types of related goods. They are substitute goods and complementary goods. Now, in economics, the best example that we use for substitute goods are tea and coffee. Tea and coffee are the two substitute goods that we always use in economics. Tea and coffee. Tea can be used as a substitute for coffee. Coffee can be used as a substitute for tea. Now, let us see what happens. If the price of tea is increasing, the price of the tea is increasing, normally consumer will demand more of coffee. Here also there is exceptional cases. There are those people who always drink tea only. For such people this will not work. So, think in another way. Tea is a substitute for coffee, coffee is a substitute for tea. That is why they are known as substitutes. So, if the price of tea increases, demand for coffee obviously increases, because people will try to substitute coffee for tea because the price of tea has already increased. That is why demand for coffee has increased, because people will try to substitute coffee for tea because price of tea has increased. So, we can write, when the price of tea increases, demand for coffee increases. So, both are up, both are increasing. Price of tea increases, therefore consumer will substitute coffee for tea. Why consumer is substituting coffee for tea? Because price of tea has increased. Therefore, in case of substitutes, we can say price and demand of substitutes are positively related. Point to be noted. In case of substitutes, price and demand are positively related because both of them are going up. When the price of tea increases, demand for coffee increases. Why demand for coffee is increasing? Because the consumer is substituting coffee for tea, because the price of tea has increased. So here price and demand for substitute goods are positively related. Point to be noted, very, very important. Now, complementary goods. What are complementary goods? Complementary goods are those goods which are used together. Car and petrol is normally we take example of car and petrol in economics to explain complementary goods. They are used together. Without petrol, the running of car is impossible, right? Both are used together. Now, what is the relationship? The demand for the car decreases when the price of petrol increases. If the price of petrol is experiencing that much of hike, people will demand less of car. So here we can find one arrow is going down and the other arrow is going up. Therefore, what can we write? The price and the demand of complementary goods are negatively related. The price and demand both are going in a different direction. The price and the demand of complementary goods. The price and the demand both are moving in an opposite direction of complementary goods are negatively related. Why it is negatively related? Because when the price of petrol goes up, demand for the car is coming down. Therefore, we can say the price and demand of complementary goods are negatively related. So, how will you conclude? The price and demand of substitute goods are positively related. The price and demand of complementary goods are negatively related. So, this is the third point. This is a third factor which influences demand. So, three factors we explained. First one is price of the given commodity. Point number 2, taste and preference of the consumer. Point number 3, price of related goods like substitutes and complementary goods. Now, let us see the next factor, income of the consumer. So far we have finished three factors which influences demand: price of given commodity, taste and preference, prices of related goods. Next is income of the consumer. Normally, what do we think? When the income of the consumer increases, demand for the good increases. When the income of the consumer decreases, demand for the good decreases. No, it is not like that. It depends on the nature of the commodity or the type of the commodity that a consumer uses. Now, we can divide that type of commodities into normal goods and inferior goods. So, normally we think when the income of the consumer increases, consumer will buy more. When the income of the consumer decreases, consumer will buy less. That is not the theory. There are some factors behind that. This is with regard to money income. In case of money income, we cannot think like that. The quantity increasing or decreasing that a consumer buys depends on the nature of the commodity. His money income may increase or decrease, but his purchase increases or decreases depends on the nature of the commodity. We can divide the nature of the commodities into two, normal goods and inferior goods. Now, normal goods we can write as rice. Inferior good we can write as bajra, jowar, etc. You have learned in class 10 regarding the types of grains, isn't it? Bajra, jowar, maize and all of inferior goods. Okay, rice is a normal good. Now, when the income of the consumer increases, when the money income of the consumer increases, consumer will buy more of normal goods. Previously, he was buying only 10 kg of rice. But now when the money income has increased, he will buy more of rice. From 10 kg, he has increased his purchase of rice to 20 kg. Now, in case of inferior goods, when the income of the consumer increases, he will not buy more of jowar and bajra. Instead of that, consumption of inferior goods, this will decrease and he will switch on to normal good. That is why in the beginning I told, when the money income increases, consumer will buy more. When the money income decreases, consumer will buy less. Don't think in that way. That is not the real thing which is happening. The consumption always depends on the nature of the good. Here itself it is proved. When the income of the consumer is increasing, he is not buying more of bajra or jowar. Instead of that, he is substituting that with the normal good. So here he was using bajra and jowar so far. Now as the money income has increased, he is buying less of this quantity and has switched on to normal good. Now he has got the potential to buy normal good, because normal good cost 1 kg of 50 rupees, but whereas inferior good cost 1 kg of 20 rupees. Now he has more potential to buy normal good. Therefore he will reduce the inferior good and he will switch on to normal good because his money income has increased. So when the money income increases, the purchase of normal good increases. When the money income increases, purchase of inferior good decreases and consumer will switch on to normal good. That is how we explain money income as an important factor which influences demand. Now we will move on to the next one. How to write this as a function in the form of a function. Individual demand function. We can write the following factors which influences the individual demand in the form of an equation, where D is the f of individual demand is the function of Px. What is meant by Px? The first factor. What is meant by Px? The first factor. Which is the first factor? Price of given commodity, Px. Then the second factor, price of related goods, PR, that is substitutes and complementary goods, prices of related goods. Then comes the next one, T, taste and preference, the second factor which I have written, taste and preference. Then comes the next one, income of the consumer. Why? Income of the consumer. Fourth factor, income of the consumer. Like that we can write this in the form of an equation. D is the function of Px, price of the given commodity, PR, price of related commodity, T, taste and preference, Y, income of the consumer. Therefore individual demand function is D is the f of Px, PR, T and Y, where Px stands for price of given commodity, PR stands for price of related goods, substitutes and complementary goods, T stands for taste and preference, Y stands for income in case of inferior and normal goods. Now let us move on to determinants of market demand, means factors influencing market demand. What are the factors influencing the market demand? Whatever factors are influencing the individual demand will affect the market demand also, because market demand means what? The quantity of a commodity that all the consumers are purchasing. The other one is a single consumer. This is all consumers. Therefore, whatever factor is influencing the individual demand will affect the market demand also. But in market demand, there are some more factors which we need to explain, additional factors other than individual demand. In individual demand, we know which are the factors influencing individual demand. Which are the factors that influence individual demand? Price of given commodity, price of related good, taste and preference, income of the consumer. Along with this, we have other factors to explain in market demand. Let us see what are they. Size of population. When the population is going on increasing, market demand will increase, because in the society more and more people are there to demand. Therefore, when the size of population increases, market demand also increases, as simple as that. Then comes the next one, season and weather. In the rainy season, demand for umbrella will increase. In the summer season, demand for cool drinks will increase. So, depending on the season and weather, the demand for certain products will increase and decrease. Next is distribution of income. That is the next factor we have to explain with regard to market demand. If the distribution of income is properly done in the market, there won't be any difference between rich and poor. If there is unequal distribution of income, for example, if richer sections are taking more benefit in the society, demand for luxuries will increase. Necessities are normal good for them. But if the income is not distributed properly, just now I told you, if the income distribution is in favor of rich people, demand for luxurious items will increase. If the income distribution is favorable for poorer sections, necessities will increase. So if richer people are more in the economy, demand for luxuries will increase. So distribution of income is another factor which affects the demand, market demand. Now, with all these factors, let us explain the market demand as follows. So, these three factors which I explained to you now, size of population, season and weather, distribution of income, along with that, whatever we explained in individual demand comes for this market demand. So, how will you write down the equation for market demand? Market demand MD is the function of, we are writing market demand function. How will you write down market demand function? MD is the F of all the factors which influences the individual demand, which are there PX, PR, income, taste and preference. Along with that, what you have to do? Distribution of income, season and weather, population. So, these three are the one which I explained to you now. Along with this, all the factors which we explained for individual demand comes for market demand. So, if you are asked with a question, what are the factors which influences a market demand, what will you write? The factors which influences the market demand are prices of the given commodity, prices of related goods, taste and preference. If more and more consumers are preferring to one commodity, the demand for that commodity increases, isn't it? Then income, then along with that season and weather, population size and distribution of income. So, all the factors you have to write for market demand. For individual demand, you need to write only PX, PR, T and Y. But for market demand, you have to write PX, PR, T, Y, S, season. Then distribution of income D, then size of population P. Okay. So, I hope this is very clear to you. So, we have learned demand, two types of demand, individual demand and market demand, determinants of individual demand and market demand, and the demand function, individual demand function and market demand function. So, if you are asked to write down the function, you have to represent it in the form of this equation. Thank you.